Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is indeed Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Let me dive right in and introduce my guest today, Avi Hoffman. Avi, thanks for joining us.
It is my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, so who is Avi Hoffman? Good question. He's a beloved actor, producer, and storyteller whose life work has been dedicated to celebrating Jewish culture and the Yiddish language. Avi was best known for his hit Two Jewish Trilogy, seen by millions of people on PBS and on stages around the world. He's brought laughter, meaning, and heritage to audiences everywhere. From New York to Tel Aviv, Montreal to Warsaw, Avi has performed and produced in countless festivals and theaters, sharing the warmth and the wisdom of Jewish life through song and through story. His connections in the world of theater, film, and television are vast, built over decades of creative collaboration and cultural advocacy. Avi's achievements have earned him a U.S. Congressional Award, recognition as a sage by the New York Times, and alongside his mother, induction into the Bronx Jewish Hall of Fame, a testament to the legacy of a family deeply rooted in Yiddishkeit and community. You know what I love mostly about that intro, Avi? It's that you and your mother
Yes.
were inducted into the Bronx Jewish Hall of Fame. Both those pieces are beautiful. How was it that you and your mother were inducted?
Well, the irony, of course, is that I was inducted first.
Yeah.
And then the year after, my mother was inducted, because I went to the guy who runs it. I said, "You can't bring me into this thing without bringing her in." And he was like, "Oh, you're absolutely right." So, yes. How did it come to be? My mom, I was born, as I think you understand, to Holocaust survivor parents.
Yeah.
And they came after the war. My dad was in Auschwitz. My mom was in the DP camps and, war cities and she was very young. My dad was 10 years older. And they came after the war and decided that, first of all, religion was not going to be a part of their life. My father came from a little shtetl in the Carpathian Mountains near Munkach. So the Munkacher Rebbe, they were Satmars, and, it was that whole world of Hasidic Judaism. And they were very Orthodox. And after the war, my dad basically said, not for me. So it was fascinating to grow up in the most Jewish home, but not from a religious perspective, from a Yiddish cultural perspective. So Yiddish was my mama lashon. I didn't speak English until I went to public school.
Right.
My dad was, he got his master's at Columbia and became a pioneer in the computer industry. But he always devoted his voluntary efforts, his volunteering, to Yiddish organizations like the YIVO. The YIVO organization is the largest archive of Eastern European Jewry in the world. And he became active with them after the war. And they actually sent him to New York to start working with the people in New York. And then he went to college and got his degree and ended up becoming a computer pioneer. But he always worked with the YIVO and eventually became the chairman of the board in the 1980s.
He met your mom there as well, right?
He met my mom, not exactly in the YIVO, but involved in YIVO organized events for children of Holocaust survivors and Holocaust survivors. And so they met at a dance at the Diplomat Hotel, and he invited her to a production of The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov. And apparently that's why I got into the theater, because their first date was going to see Chekhov. But then she became a teacher. and she studied at the Jewish Teachers Seminary. She was my teacher in the little Yiddish school in the Bronx, where really the remnants, what was left of the Yiddish world in New York, certainly, and maybe in America for the most part, other than, the bastions of Yiddishkeit in Montreal and Toronto, every major city had like a little, place where it was kept alive. We were those in the Bronx. On Bainbridge Avenue, there was a little school called Sholem Aleichem Volksschule Nummer 21, number 21. And there I went every day, 5 days a week after public school. So my mom was a teacher there, and the families we were involved with are still the leading families in the world of Yiddish culture, including people like Zalman Malotic, who runs the National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne.
Yes.
Schechter family. Mordechai Schechter wrote a dictionary. Binyamin Schechter runs the Yiddish Philharmonic Orchestra. His sister Ruchel is the editor of the Vorwärts. And Sure Ruchel, his other sister, married the Visvanat family into the Visvanats, who have now, they were the ones, Arun Visvanat, if I'm not mistaken, translated Harry Potter into Yiddish.
The Yiddish.
Yes.
Oh,
And it was
interesting.
a very big, it was a pretty much a very good seller. They had to do a few editions. So that was the Schechters. Then there were the Gottesmans. Itzikel Gottesman to this day teaches Yiddish, I think, in Austin, Texas. His mother, Bella Gottesman, or Bela, as everybody knows her, was one of the most famous Yiddish singers and folk singers, and wrote music and composers. The Waletskys, the Fishmans. Josh Waletsky, I think, was nominated for an Academy Award for Image Before My Eyes. And he was involved in Poiln, in the big book, Poiln. So all of these families, and we were there in the 1960s, keeping Yiddish alive. And then we all went our ways. Our family moved to Israel, which is how I became Avi. I was Avrum, just like you, Avrum Ber.
Romale.
Yeah, Avrem Alimalamed. So, then we moved to Israel, and suddenly it was a non-Yiddish world where Yiddish was frowned upon and told to stay away. But I had already started working in the Yiddish theater professionally when I was 10 in New York, in the Volksbühne, as a matter of fact. So I was doing theater from the time I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I played Tevye, Fiddler on the Roof, in the community center in the Bronx.
Beautiful.
And Zalman Malotic was my piano player. So, I'm just trying to give you a little background of how deep in this Yiddish world my family was. My mom then went on to she got her bachelor's at the University of Miami, which is interesting because I got my bachelor's at the University of Miami 1 year before she did. And then she went on to get her master's at Columbia. And then she became professor of Yiddish at Columbia University for 25 years. She was also a journalist in the Vorwärts for 35 years. She wrote 10 award-winning plays that have been produced all over the world and published 8 books. So both my parents were committed to the idea that Hitler tried not only to kill the Jewish people, he wanted to kill all of Jewish culture and Yiddish culture, because 95% of the Jews in Europe spoke Yiddish. So I grew up in a home where Jewish identity had much less to do with the faith of Judaism. And even though we lived in Israel, we were not really Zionists. We were people who loved Israel because it's a great country and everybody's Jewish, and wow. But it was not friendly to Yiddishkeit. It is much more today than it was then.
So I want to sort of go with this idea here.
Please.
My father was an Orthodox rabbi, Avi.
Okay.
So as I was growing up, and I remember this since I was knee high to a grasshopper, as my mother used to say, We would be halachic in nature,
Right.
have Shabbat, and we would keep Shabbat and Motzi and Kiddush, and obviously the high holidays and Pesach and Shavuot, the big holidays were very, very important in our home. So I was imbued with the idea that Judaism is halacha, that Judaism is law, and
Right.
this is and learning Torah. When I was 20, I gave that up, and I became more of a cultural Jew, if you will. Although
Right.
I still embrace Torah and I love learning it. So my question to you is, how was my upbringing different than yours? Did you have the
Oh,
holidays? Did you celebrate them?
yes. Oh God, yes. So it's interesting. It's not as different as you might think,
Yes.
because you cannot have a secular Judaism without acknowledging that for thousands of years it was the faith
Mhm.
that kept us alive. We didn't have the luxury of being secular for, the first few thousand years of our existence. So we celebrated the faith from a cultural perspective. So let me explain. So how we're different, you probably went to shul.
Yes.
I never went to shul.
Mhm.
My bar mitzvah was in Bnei Barak in Israel with the most Orthodox Jews of them all, except for Mea Sha'arim. But we didn't go to shul when I was a kid. But I knew about every holiday. We celebrated every holiday. We celebrated the literature of the Bible. We celebrated the folklore of the holidays, the songs, every song. Pesach for us was a concert because every song was sung,
Yeah.
and in different versions. There were the Ashkenazi versions and the Taimani versions and the Yiddish
Sephardic version. Yeah.
Sephardic versions, right? So we celebrated the faith from a cultural, literature, folkloristic, cultural perspective. So in a way, I know a lot about the faith. I read the Torah, I read the Talmud, I studied it in Israel. I mean, I knew the stories, I know the history, I know a lot, but we were never religious. To
Mhm.
us, Judaism had very little to do with the organization of the faith elements, and much more to do with the fact that for thousands of years, what kept us together was not only the faith, but everything that was created by those who eventually became less faithful. People like you who then became cultural Jews, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
I always find that interesting too. We called ourselves secular Jews,
Yes.
but cultural Jews, secular, secular humanism, tikkun olam. That was a huge thing for us. And I still, here, as a matter of fact, let's human better is the shirt I'm wearing today. I am very active in the world of trying to figure out how to make the world a better place. And that to me was something instilled in me by the faith and by the culture.
So when I was growing up, Moshe Rabbeinu was a
Yes,
huge
huge.
character in my life, and I
Yep,
would study the Torah with Rashi, you know, and
yep,
we
sure.
would I
Yep,
went to yeshiva later on. We studied Brachot or Masechet
yep,
Shabbat with
yep,
Tosfot, the Rambam, and et cetera, et cetera.
yep.
So, who were the characters, the Jewish characters, that were important in your upbringing?
Oh wow. Sholem Aleichem, Yud Lamed Peretz, Mendele Moiches Sfurim,
Yeah.
Sholem Ash. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The greatest songwriters, the greatest poets, the greatest theater. When you look at plays now, I taught a course at the University of Miami, which interestingly enough, as I mentioned, my mom got her bachelor's there. I got my bachelor's there. We've donated our family archive to the University of Miami Library, and I'm currently a graduate student there getting my degree in documentary film,
Lovely.
my master's. And I'll probably go on to a doctorate about Yiddish, saving Yiddish. One of my documentary films is called Saving Yiddish.
Yes.
It's all about the people all over the world. I've traveled to Sweden. I've traveled to Romania several times, New York, needless to say. I travel around the world, and wherever I go, I try to find the people involved in keeping Yiddishkeit. And again, Yiddishkeit to me is not only the language. Yiddishkeit, the word, means the Jewish chain.
Yes.
Yiddishkeit, right? So it's Jewishness. It's the essence of the chain of continuation of Judaism from the beginning till now. So we include in our work as an organization, as much as we can, the Sephardic and the Ladino and the there are so many. People don't even know. Mugrabi. Do you know what Mugrabi is?
No, I don't.
Mugrabi is the um, is the Arabic Yiddish language, the Arabic Jewish language, not Yiddish, Arabic Jewish language. So it's just like Ladino. Ladino is the combination of Spanish and Hebrew.
Yes.
So the Jews developed through the Spanish, world. Mughrabi was the language that came out of the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, Farsi, all of the Persian languages. I mean, Achashverosh, man, Queen Esther,
Right. Right.
the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention the name of God.
That's correct.
That is correct. So you've got a whole language and culture that was developed in the Middle Eastern countries by the Jews, and a language that very few people even know exists. So
I want to. Yes, go ahead.
no, but I was just going to say that this idea that Yiddishkeit is a big umbrella that all the Jews can find a home under, safety under, that is not related to the faith element. Because for some people, the faith is great, and for others, it's not. It's not dependent on the Zion element of Israel. Because, yes, some people love Israel, some people don't. Some people agree with everything Israel does, no matter what. And other people go, wait a minute. You know what? Maybe we need to look at this a little different. But within the culture, right? If Judaism has survived for thousands of years on three legs, the faith, Zion, and the culture. So the faith has gone through its changes, but it's still, from Orthodox to atheism, we're still there. Israel has been in existence for, coming up on soon 80 years, in a few more years, which is amazing, and what a miracle. But, again, it goes up and down in terms of how people relate to it. But the culture has been with us through the entire time. We just didn't appreciate it as much. We've gone through periods, especially after the Holocaust, where the Yiddish element of the culture was depressed in order to make Hebrew and Zionism the centerpiece of Jewish identity. So 1,000 years of Yiddish culture were kind of swept under the rug, because now we had an Israel, we all had to learn Hebrew. So my job, as I see it, is to bring back, what we have forgotten. And Tikkun Olam is a very, very big part of that.
I just want to review a couple points about the history
Sure.
of Yiddish. Its origins is in the 9th century. Yiddish emerged around the 9th century in Central Europe, primarily amongst Ashkenazi Jews, blending High German dialect with Hebrew, Aramaic, and Slavic elements, which you alluded to. It began in the Rhineland region, what is now Germany, where Jewish communities integrated local German dialects with their own linguistic traditions. Yiddish is written in the Hebrew alphabet, right?
Yes.
Distinguishing it from German and other European languages that use the Latin script. The Holocaust, as you mentioned, decimated Yiddish-speaking communities, with millions of speakers killed, leading to a sharp decline in its daily use and cultural prominence.
Half this population of Europe, half the Jewish population, 95% of whom spoke Yiddish, were murdered. So half the speakers of the language were suddenly gone.
Yes.
The fact that it's still around is a miracle in itself.
When I was growing up, my parents would speak Yiddish in our home. We lived in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada.
Yeah.
My father, as I mentioned, was the rabbi there. Have you heard of Kitchener?
I have not, but it's one of the few places in Canada I don't think I've heard of that had
It's
it
an hour.
too.
It's an hour from Toronto.
Okay.
It used to be called Little Berlin, Avi.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it was called Little Berlin. Had a huge German population,
Right.
and my father went there in 1954, I believe it was, with my mother after they got married. Had 5 little bambinos,
Wow.
us, and he organized and created a beautiful Jewish community there. In our home, Yiddish was spoken so that we did not understand the message
Right.
between my mother and
Right.
father. But what I do remember is that my father embraced Yiddish. He loved it.
Hmm.
And Avi, his Yiddish, which he constantly referred to as sort of the literary Yiddish,
Right. Yes, a
it was a
Litvak.
beautiful Yiddish,
Yes, he
right?
was a Litvak, Germanic.
He was a
Right.
Litvak, but there's also sort of, just to be a little crass here, there's also sort of a street Yiddish,
Right. Sure.
right, which I was privy to through Holocaust survivors in Toronto who spoke. It was almost like very brash, much different than the literary one you would hear from Batsheva Singer
Right.
and probably
Actually,
Agnon as well.
Bashevis was not. Chaim Grade was the literary.
I'm glad.
Isaac Bashevis Singer, one of the reasons he won the Nobel Prize was because he was not that literary. He took the language into places where all the great literary figures didn't want to go. They didn't want to show Jews as demons dealing with the occult and ghosts and devils. He didn't want, most of them didn't want Jews to be depicted as people who had sex. So, yes, your father, although I called it Litvak, it was really, he was a Yeke. If you guys were Germans, then it was part of that very high level literary kind of language.
Yes.
But, once you got into the Galiciane, that's where it got into the streets. It was the peasants. It was not the rabbis like your father. These were the tailors and the carpenters and the bakers and they were just, some of them couldn't read. Hasidism as a movement came out of the idea that you didn't have to be so knowledgeable to love God and pray to God. The famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, of the shepherd who's out, in the fields praying to God with his flute, is more valuable than the rabbi who prays 3 times a day. But while he's praying, he's going over his grocery list or how he's going to go raise money for whatever the next thing is. Dvekis, right? Dvekus, dvekut. So to me, both sides complement each other. Because the Litvaks and the Galiciane, maybe they fought and thought of each other as the McCoys in the Hatfields or whatever they call them,
so to speak.
But really, we're all just one tiny little 0.2% of the world's population, and we have to embrace each other again. And it's still problematic. Listen, in Israel, there's still a big, division between the Sfaradim and the Ashkenazim. And here in America and all over the world, we still deal with a lot of division within the Jewish community. And I hope, and my goal as an organization is, again, to find a place where everybody can feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No matter what your politics, not right, left, in the middle, or not at all. Anarchy. Whether you're a Zionist or a non-Zionist, you agree with Israel or don't agree with Israel, doesn't matter. Because at the Yiddishkeit Initiative, we are providing the cultural sustenance that the Jews have. And again, I don't want to make big generalizations, but when you forget who Isaac Bashevis Singer is, when you don't know who Chaim Grade was. You know, Chaim Grade was supposed to win the Nobel Prize that year. It was between him and Bashevis. The entire literati of America, high-level literati, thought it was going to be Grade because I mean, he came out of an orthodox, not just orthodox, he came out of a home of Musar. Do you know Musar? The Musar
Yes,
movement?
yeah.
I mean, they were nuts. These guys were crazy. I mean, they literally made students go to a hardware store and try to order a cake.
Right, right. That's correct. Yeah.
That was their lesson. You go into the hardware store, you ask for a cake. And when they tell you you can't have a cake because it's a hardware store, you insist that you
Yeah.
have to have a cake until they throw you out and beat you up. And that's Musa, ethics. Somehow that's supposed to teach you. So Grade came out of that world. And he too eventually became a little more secular. But he wrote about that. His most famous piece, which he should have won the Nobel Prize for, I think, believe it or not, was something called Mein Vikuach mit Herschel Razainer. So if you don't know it, you should go look it up. My Quarrel with Herschel Razainer. There are English translations. It's a
Beautiful
novella
title.
turned
Beautiful
into
title.
a play and a movie.
Yes.
I did both the play and I watched the movie, and Saul
Yeah.
Rubinek from Canada, your
Yeah.
friend Saul,
Yes.
he starred in the movie. The depth of what Chaim Grade was talking about, the concept of how can a Jew believe in a God, in a Jewish God, or how can a Jew not believe in a Jewish God after the Holocaust? And that was the main thrust of that piece. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
No, but he wrote the Aguna,
yes, correct.
also classic
Classic,
book, right?
classic, classic. But
Yeah.
most people have no idea who Chaim Grade is. So lost, a lost treasure, diamonds, Sholem Ash. Do you know Sholem Ash?
I know the name.
Right.
Yes.
So Sholem Ash wrote some of the most brilliant literature of the early 1900s. And he wrote the play called God of Vengeance, Gott von Nekumet, which was, again, mind boggling. In 1907, this guy in Poland writes a play about an Orthodox Jew who runs a brothel, and his daughter falls in love with one of the prostitutes
Yes.
in 1907.
Incredible.
Incredible. Now,
Yeah.
needless to say, the play was a huge success. When it opened on Broadway, everybody got arrested. And Paula Vogel took that story and turned it into the Broadway play Indecent. But if I ask most people, do you know who Sholem Ash was? They look at me like, what? And Isaac Bashevis Singer, he won the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
He did win the Nobel Prize. And still people don't know who he is.
Did Agnon write in Yiddish?
Adnan did write in Yiddish, yes, even though he became much more known for his Hebrew.
For his Hebrew, which was beautiful Hebrew, right?
Magnificent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, one of the things I found when I started ensconcing myself in that literature through my chavruta, Motel, we learn on Monday nights. He's very much into that, and I think he's going to love this show, by the way. Is I said, Motel, I'll tell you the truth. I have a bit of a problem with this literature. And he said, why? I said, because it's just so sad. It's the trials and tribulations of the shtetl,
Right.
and I didn't want to be sad. How do you deal with that?
Well, look, I'm by career, by profession, I'm an actor.
Yes.
Sad and happy, the thespians are, you cannot separate them. Happiness and sadness go together. And that, if nothing else, is what the Jewish people probably have more to teach the world than anybody else. because our sadness is sadder than most, and our happiness is happier than most. And so we constantly ride this roller coaster of happiness and sadness, and that's life, right? I mean, whether you're Jewish or not, you have great things happen and terrible things happen. People die, people live, people are born, people, there's a time, zman lekol davar, right? So to me, the sadness is not the problem. The problem is how, if the analogy I like to make is, and there's a great Hasidic story about it too, about the guy who finds a diamond and he wants to protect it for future generations, and he buries it in the backyard.
Yeah.
And then he puts a little rock near it to make sure he knows where it is. His wife sees that he put in a rock and thinks, ooh, I like that. Let me go put another rock and we'll make a rock garden. And the kids and that. Well, another generation goes by and nobody knows where the diamond is anymore. I kind of feel like that's where we are as a Jewish people right now. We have this amazing treasure that we have buried somewhere in the backyard. And there's all these things now. We've added into this backyard all these different complications. Are you a Reconstructionist Jew? Or are you a liberal Jew? Are you a Reform Jew, conservative, neoconservative, conservadox? Oh, wait, no, I'm Orthodox. I'm Hasidic, but I'm not just Hasidic. I'm a Satmar Hasid. No, I'm a Lubavitch. And it's like, oh my God, so much. And then Israel, there are problems. And you've got more than half of the Jewish population in the world affected strongly by what Israel may or may not decide to do. And again, I'm not trying to be political about it. I don't like the idea that a lot of people are dead. And so there are Jews who look at that whole situation and go, oh my God, I want nothing to do with that, especially the younger Jews. You and I were brought up in the world of Israel is the salvation of the Jewish people and can do no wrong. It's a miracle of God. Well, you know what? It's human beings, and they happen to be Jewish, and there are some nuns, and it's a tiny little country, and I lived there for 10 years, so I have a very unique perspective on Israel. I know the good, and I also know the bad. I know how terrible it is. I know how terribly stressful it is to live there.
Yes.
You can't live in Israel and actually be like normal because it's just constant rockets coming at you, air raid side. I was there during the war in 73. I was 15 years old. I'm riding my bike on the highway because there are no cars. It's great. And all of a sudden, I see a truck with a tank on it heading north on Kvish Haifa. And then another truck with and then another truck with it. And we all kind of looked at each other, all the kids in the neighborhood, and going, what the hell is going on? 10 minutes later, the air raid sirens started. And now we're in the basement. We're in the shelters. We're in the safe rooms. How do you live like that? It's a terrible way to live. So once again, the idea that we have these treasures, but they've been hidden by all these other things that we have to deal with as a people. And we've lost these amazing, incredibly beautiful, pieces of culture, literature, music, the songs. But so now let me go to the positive side. So I've been doing this all my life. I'm 67 years old. I'm not a baby. Okay. I've been in the Yiddish world, in the Jewish world, in the Israeli world all my life. I can say to you with full confidence that right now, in 2025, on planet Earth, there is a global Yiddish renaissance. happening as we speak. And it is the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. What is the one country in the entire world that has determined that Yiddish language and culture are a official national minority language? Ready? Do 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 do
I'm on Filkas,
do. Da-na-na-na-na. I'm waiting for your answer.
Romania,
No. Na 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 na.
Poland,
Nope. Da-dum bum bum.
ba-bum,
Um,
Canada,
no. Sweden.
Sweden.
Yes. 25 years ago, unbeknownst to anybody, certainly not me, because I only found out about it last year, Sweden decided that Yiddish was an official national minority language.
Hmm.
And now, 25 years later, they are investing enormous amounts of funding to support the study and development of Yiddish language. They are the biggest publisher of Yiddish curriculum for children in the world.
Why is this, Avi?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
Thank you.
So, Sweden, unlike most countries, decided that their success was because of the people in the country, not just because they're smart, politicians or whatever. So they decided to identify 30 years ago, they decided to identify 5 cultures and languages that made Sweden Sweden. And they asked for proposals. So needless to say, Finnish. The Finns have been there forever. Roma, the Roma people, traveled to Sweden early. Tornedalian is some little indigenous thing. There's a Somish is another. But apparently the Jews arrived 350 years ago to Sweden speaking Yiddish. They were Ashkenazi Jews who went to Sweden to do whatever. And they became involved in the culture for 350 years and became part of the government, part of the whole society. Then the Holocaust. Now, we all know Raoul Wallenberg, and we all know that after the Holocaust, and like 20,000 Holocaust survivors who spoke Yiddish moved to Sweden. Mm-hmm. Now the Swedish community, the Jewish community in Sweden, almost doubled just because of that, and continued for the next 80 years to become part of the culture. So they put out these proposals. The 5 languages went and prepared their proposals. I interviewed the woman who was responsible for the Jewish one. They had a preliminary meeting and a vote of the committee. And Roma, all unanimous. When it came to Yiddish, not one vote.
Really?
Yes, not one. And this woman got so angry. She had worked with these people for 2 years, preparing this enormous proposal. Why would Yiddish qualify? And she went on a campaign for 2 years before the final vote. And interestingly enough, she told me the story. It's in the film. Chava Alberstein came to Sweden to do a concert for Israel. And this woman called up every hotel in Stockholm and said, "Hi, I'd like to speak to Chava Alberstein." "Oh, we don't have a guest." "Hi, I'd like to speak to Chava Alberstein." "Oh, she's not, we don't have. Hi, I'd like to speak to Oh, yes, I can't give you her room number, but we can certainly let her know you called. Yeah. Tell her it's, and she gave her the name, Susanna, Schneiderman Katz, and said, "Please call me. The future of Yiddish depends on you."
On this call.
On this call. And Chava Alberstein called her and said, "What is this about?" And she explained. She said, you're going to do a performance tonight for all the people on this committee, for the prime minister, for the royalty, for everybody. If you could take 2 minutes and talk about Yiddish and how important it is to the Jewish people. And Chava Alberstein apparently went out and sang only Yiddish songs for the first 15 minutes and talked about how Yiddish was the foundation of Ashkenazi Judaism. And then they had the vote, and it was unanimous.
Fantastic.
Isn't that a great story?
It's a beautiful story.
I mean, it's just, but nobody knows these things because
it's a bizarre story, really.
I'm sorry?
It's bizarre.
It is incredibly bizarre because here I am, 67 years old, and I didn't know that Sweden is my Yiddish home.
Oh, it's fantastic. Just a couple of questions. I know we have a limited amount of time.
Sure.
Through your filter of Yiddish culture, Jewish culture, who is God? What is God like?
Wow. You're not going to like my answer, but I'm going to tell you. You're God. I'm God. My favorite Jewish philosopher is Baruch Spinoza. To me, Spinoza was the one who really figured it out to the best of anybody's ability to figure it out. And he was ostracized and excommunicated for it.
Yes, he was.
So if you study Spinoza, he basically, in one sentence, he said, God is nature and nature is God. Mm-hmm. And for that, they said, you're a heretic, get the hell out. And he died of tuberculosis. And it took another couple of 100 years before the Jews went, oh, wait a minute. Maybe he wasn't so, maybe he was okay.
Maybe he had a point.
Maybe he had a point. We should bring him back. So to me, that kind of, and again, you're talking to someone who was brought up as an atheist, mm-hmm. who in my 20s and 30s became an agnostic. And now I'm not sure. That's a joke, by the way.
No, it's a good joke. I got it.
Right. So
it was a cup. It was a cup.
Yeah. Right. So you got to kind of understand that, to me, God is a word. Mm-hmm. It's a word that we created. God had 72 names, right? In the Jewish understanding. Do you know why?
No, why?
Because there were 72 tribes. When Abraham came up with the concept of the first corporation, he basically said, listen, instead of having 72 gods with different names, and each one is a different god, why don't we have one God with 72 names and they're all the same? And you can't see him. The whole story with Ur and his father and the idols and breaking the idols. See, I know a lot about.
Yeah, you know a lot of Torah.
So this idea that the word God is the problem. Mm-hmm. The word automatically gets people defensive. Well, my God is my God, and my God is better than your God because that's the nature of God. If it's my God, then he's got to be better than your God because otherwise I'd want your God. So once you say the word God, it creates a problem. But Spinoza, to me, he basically said, listen, call it whatever you want. God is nature. Nature is everything. Everything that was, everything that will be, everything that could have been, everything that might be, everything that is everything is God. Well, that means you're God. And that means I'm God. And if we look at each other as God, then maybe we'll be nicer to each other.
You mentioned a few characters that stand out and stood out for you throughout your life in the Yiddish world, writers, leaders, and so on. And when you were mentioning those names, one of the names that popped in my head was someone who my father used to speak about a lot and tell jokes of that emanated from this man, and that was Herschel Ostropoler.
Sure, Herschel Ostropoler.
Tell us about him for a minute, and maybe perhaps give us a joke.
Well, no, I don't know that I have a joke, but Herschel Ostropoler is one of so many characters in the Yiddish literature.
Yes.
But you see, to me, the more important character is not necessarily Herschel Ostopolier as opposed to Tevye der Milchiker. You know, if you want to look at the effect on the world, Tevye der Milchiker is much more, impressive than Herschel Ostopolier. But to me, the most important identity of a Jew is what most of the writers in the 1800s started to, figure out. It was called the concept of das Pintale Yid,
Yes.
a dot of a Jew.
Mhm.
Every Jew is a dot, and it's a tiny little dot. And all those dots together become Jewishness, the Jews, the Jewish people. But it's the Pintale Yid, it's that Pintale Yid that every writer tried to find. Herschel Ostropolia is one Pintale Yid. Kuni Lemel,
Yes.
Kuni Lemel, one of the greatest characters to this day. If you watch the movie from Israel with Mike Burstein, Kuni Lemel, I mean, it's like one of the greatest movies. But again, I don't know if you have children or not, but they don't know who Kuni Lemel is, maybe. Probably not. Very few Jewish kids today know really anything about the culture. And again, I'm not, I don't want to, it's not about the religion. It's not about Israel. It's about the literature. How do you not know Kuni Lemel?
Yes.
How do you not know Herschel Ostopolier? How do you not know the God of Vengeance? How do you not know Peretz's great work? How do you not remember, as a Jew, that many of these writers died for their art?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the Holocaust poets, so many of whom were I do a lecture and a concert. There's two versions. One is a lecture, one is a concert. I call it God and the Holocaust. And there it is, the word God. And everybody goes, well, you know what? All the writers, or many of the writers, had to struggle with the concept. How do you have a God next to a Holocaust? How do they relate to each other? And again, Chaim Grade wrote one of the most brilliant pieces, Mein Vikuach mit Herschel Razainer, Herschel Ostropolia, Herschel Razainer. They were best friends in the Hasidic world growing up in the shtetl. The Holocaust separates them. They each think the other is dead. And in 1972, they meet by chance in a park in Toronto.
Yes.
On a bench. And one has gone on to become a great rabbi, and the other has gone on to become Chaim Grade, the great writer, who is totally secular and cannot believe in a God after the Holocaust. And they argue. They have a disputation, vikuach. A vikuach in Hebrew is argument, but a vikuach is also a disputation. And they have this conversation. It's one of the greatest pieces of literature ever.
Mm-hmm.
All of these writers had to struggle with this. And they wrote songs, and they wrote poetry, and they wrote stories, and they wrote essays. So my mom was the one who actually created the original lecture part of it. I've taken it to the next step and added songs and turned it into, it's on my YouTube channel. People can find it if they like. It's called God and the Holocaust. And it's just, we need to start having these conversations again. Because if we don't talk, we're not going to solve any problems.
Avi, Elie Wiesel put God on trial, did he not?
Yes, he did. And he wasn't the only one. Many Jewish writers put God on trial, even before the Holocaust. If you go back, I think it was not Shalom Aleichem and not Peretz. Was it Leivik? I don't remember off the top of my head right now. But there was one of the great Jewish writers who wrote a whole thing about putting God on trial. And yeah.
I think when I ask people what they love about Yiddish, And with this, we'll wrap up. They talk about the descriptive nature of a singular word. So I printed up a few words of which I thought would be very powerful and just put one or two by you. A fabissinate. What's a fabissinate?
It's someone who's very bitter.
Right?
Now, fabissen is somebody who's biting and chewing, but bitter, fabissen. Yeah.
When you're on Spilkus, what are you on?
You're nervous and upset and concerned and nervous and, sitting on needles, pins and needles in English.
Is there somebody who's fadrate? What does that mean about them?
Confused, to drehen sich is to turn around in circles, which makes you dizzy. So verdreht is someone who's confused.
A schnorrer. What's a schnorrer?
Well, now you see, that's a very interesting question. Yeah. In the 1600s, Israel Zangwill in London wrote an essay called The King of Schnorrers, which eventually became a musical, which I actually was involved in. And at that time, being a schnorrer was actually a highly respected profession. Oh. Your job was to go and raise money for the yeshiva students so that they could study. And the king of schnorrers was the guy who raised the most money. Well, in the story, the king of schnorrers has a daughter. And this student, and the student falls in love, and it's a whole thing. But today the word schnorrer has become much less positive, and it's just somebody who's always down on his luck, asking for money, beggars, a schnorrer,
Okay, so to wrap things up, we have a different sort of world which we live in, one of which includes AI. And I'm sure AI plays a role in Yiddish. If it doesn't, it will.
AI plays a role in everything.
So I always ask AI to basically create an ode to a poem about my guests. And this is an ode to Avi Hoffman.
Oh.
In the glow of stage lights, Avi stands, a storyteller with heart and hands, weaving tales of Yiddishkeit's embrace, bringing warmth to every time and every place. From New York Pulse to Tel Aviv shore, Montreal's chill to Warsaw's core, his two Jewish trilogy, a vibrant song, laughs and tears where heritage belongs. Millions have seen through PBS lens the wisdom shared, the joy that mends. A master of stage, a film of lore, he opens hearts and unlocks doors. With every note, each story spun, he honors roots from father to son. A congressional award, a sage's name, the Bronx Hall of Fame with his mother's claim. Yiddish lives in Avi's voice so clear, a culture's pulse, a legacy dear. Through decades of crafts, his spirit sown, a beacon of light forever known. And I have to tell you, I've never had a guest who seems like they're in so much pain listening to a poem about themselves.
Well, thank you. I find it very hard to listen to things about me. It's weird that way. I don't enjoy it that much. But let me close by saying that one of the things I've done with and through my organization is, and I started to talk about it earlier, and I never finished the thought. I taught a course at the University of Miami. I'm faculty, and my course was called Yiddish: A Foundation of Modern Culture. And what we don't realize yet, and I hope that my work will help to expose this more, is the idea that, we think of modern culture, movies and Broadway and concerts and whatever it is, comedy, we think of it as this thing. It's modern culture. But if you actually look at the roots of how modern culture came into being, you cannot, under any circumstances, avoid finding the roots in the Yiddish world of the 1800s. Once the Jews came from Europe, Fiddler on the Roof, Anna, Tefka, Anna, now we're in America. Well, there were 1 million, 2 million who came, and they were creators, they were actors and writers and composers, and they started the Yiddish theater. and they had 24 Yiddish newspapers, and they were writing Yiddish songs. Irving Berlin didn't become Irving Berlin because he was Israel Berlin and he was writing Cohen owes me $97,
Yes.
which was how the Yiddish vaudeville became Yiddish theater. Yiddish theater became Broadway. The music came out of the liturgical world into the Tin Pan Alley, out of the Yiddish world into Tin Pan Alley, into Broadway musicals. Comedy, come on. I mean, really? Menashe Skolnick, a name that very few people know. He was the first comedian to stand up. He was the first.
Wow.
And Henny Youngman and Rodney Dangerfield and Milton Berle were all stealing his material from Yiddish and translating it into English. And now Mel Brooks and Woody Allen and Carl Reiner and all these guys, Alan Arkin, Alan Alda. I mean, the list, Alan King, just the Allens. So my course basically taught how if we take a look at what we think of as modern culture, it's really based in its roots in the world of Yiddish language, Yiddish culture, Yiddish theater, and Yiddishkeit.
Avi, I have to tell you something. I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Me too. I stayed for the whole hour.
Yeah, you did. You stay for the entire hour, and I want to thank you for that. We can do another hour if you like, but
Not today, but maybe another time.
Down the road. And I just simply want to wish you Yisher Koach, because your task is not a simple one. It seems like it's getting a little bit easier, but I happen to agree with you. I do remember my father speaking that literary Yiddish from the pulpit in our home, and it was so incredibly beautiful. And when I started to understand the words, it's not a one-word definition. It's a phrase. It's a sentence. It's a character. It's a personality of a people, right?
Yiddish is unique among all the languages in the world because it's the only language that never had a home.
Yeah.
Till now.
Yes.
Until Sweden.
Until Sweden. Yeah, we have to thank God for Sweden. Anyway, thank you so
My
much for being
here. I'm done.
I appreciate it so much. And to all my listeners and viewers, I hope you enjoy this. I'm sure you will. And I'd love to hear your comments. Zeitgesinnt, and we'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.